Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Astral Perceptions here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Mark Johnson, and tonight I'm going to go into something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about a television show that many of you may have seen. If not, I highly recommend it. And even though it gets into religion, and anybody who listens to me know I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. I don't follow Christianity to the letter anymore. But yet, as a contradiction, I've always been fascinated with biblical history and how the Bible came together, what's true, what's not true, what's been lost, and different things that have been found over the years. Because even though I don't consider myself a Christian, there is still a lot within Christianity that I feel is good. In fact, I feel most religions, while I feel most organized religions have been usurped by people who use it to control the masses and other people. There's still kernels of truth in there that we can learn from. And to even quote, I believe it was Jesus who once said that there are many pathways, or the many paths to the Father, or in other words, many different roads spiritually that one can follow that would lead you to where you need to go on a spiritual level. And if you go with the concept of reincarnation, you could be living multiple lifetimes in different religions. You can be a Christian in one religion, a Muslim in another, a Hindu in another. You could be a Native American and following Native American spirituality. Heck, you could have been a Viking back in the old days following the old Norse gods, Odin and Thor and Loki. And no, I'm not talking about the Marvel Universe. So there's different ways of spirituality all around us, kernels of truth that are there. But one thing that I've usually avoided in the past was Christian-based or religious-based television shows. Usually because they're overly reverent and they're really shoving concepts down your throat, and just in general, they haven't engaged me. Now, I remember growing up in the 70s, they had the big, long miniseries, Jesus of Nazareth, which Franco Zeffirelli directed it. And remember, I'm an old film guy, so I know a lot of these directors and actors and everything, which annoys my wife to no end. But, that came out in the 70s, and it was a long miniseries, very reverent, followed the Bible mostly to the letter. Not a lot of, tooling around or things changed for dramatic purposes. I've seen things like Jesus Christ Superstar, actually one of my favorite films and musicals of all time. And what I really liked about Jesus Christ Superstar, despite the fact that it was very hippies 1960s style, is the fact that Jesus, as played by the great Ted Neely, and Judas by the even more incredible Carl Anderson, who passed away a while back, fantastic in their roles. Ted Neely presenting not so much a spiritual religious Jesus. There's almost like an anger beneath him. There was a troubleness, which made him feel more human. Even Judas, who played by Carl Anderson, who was very, very conflicted. He thought that they should be going in one direction. Jesus was always going in another direction. There was a love-hate relationship between the two of them in the movie, of course, and the Broadway play. But it was fascinating for its time. Now, again, a lot of people can't handle it. It's a lot of screaming, but you know what? It's still very, very cool. I know NBC tried doing a remake of it with John Legend playing Jesus here just last year, which I didn't really care for the production values on it. I thought it was rather boring myself. Nobody comes close to Ted Neely and Carl Anderson for me, so that's just it. But there's been other movies as well. There's the very controversial Passion of the Christ, Martin Scorsese's movie based on the Greek novel. I can't remember the author's name. With presenting a very different version of Jesus, a very tortured version of Jesus. And Scorsese's version went even farther, but I didn't really, it wasn't a great movie. I kind of liked some things where they went with it, but for the most part, it went so far off the rails, it wasn't even funny. Now, I'm going to talk about a new show that came out last year, and it is now, if you can get the Peacock app, you can watch all 8 episodes of the first season. It's called The Chosen. And from a filmmaking standpoint, I'm fascinated with this show because it was 100% crowd-funded. No big studios came in to do it. It was a small independent studio. These 2 guys got together. They wrote it, produced it. They raised the money on GoFundMe, and they were able to make an entire season from it. And let me tell you something. For a small independent crowd-funded production, it's phenomenal. The costumes, the sets, the actors everybody in this is great. You would never know that this was a crowd-funded independently produced series. And what I really like about it is that it comes at the early days of Jesus, just before he really starts his ministry, but it goes into the background of several of the disciples, including Simon and Andrew the fisherman. It goes into Matthew, the tax collector, but it really shows them as people, and the writing is great. The characterizations and the actors themselves do a fantastic job. And then comes Jesus. Now, the actor who plays Jesus, ironically, is a Catholic playing a Jew. He's absolutely phenomenal. In my opinion, he is the best Jesus ever, because he plays him as an absolute 100% believable human being. Someone with a great sense of humor, who smiles a lot, who talks passionately, but it's not like fire and brimstone or all super reverent, but he gets his point across. He tells the parables. The way he teaches. Yes, he performs miracles in the show, but you know what? It's not so overly flashy done Cecil B. DeMille style. It's very, very realistic, very spiritually enlightening. And I found myself totally enthralled in the show. And they're making a second season, and I can't wait for it to come out. They get into other characters involving the Romans. And from what I understand, they really went to great pains to be as historically accurate as possible in terms of, the costumes and the culture at the time and how everybody would be. Now, if I have any complaint, they still fall into the trap of following the Gospels too far, but I can't really blame them because it is a Christian-based show. They made by Christians, going into the Christian faith, granted. Now, I do believe Jesus existed. I don't believe the canonical Bible version of Jesus 100%, because I believe that those manuscripts have been altered and changed over the years, ever since the Bible's first put together during the councils of Constantinople and Nicaea, and then rewritten and recopied, and some things changed or added out. One of the concepts would be the concept of reincarnation, which was very much believed back in those days by the Israelites, by the Jews. And there are several references still in there. First of all, the reference of being born again. Okay, you hear born again Christians. Well, that was twisted, or they took so much out of it that modern Christians don't understand that Jesus was talking about reincarnation, this cycle of rebirth, this cycle of coming back and learning these lessons. And we could not know God until we've been born again. Well, that means we cannot know Creator Source until we have learned all these lessons, come back and had these experiences. There's a section in the Bible where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do the people say I am?" And so they respond, "Oh, some say you're Moses, some say you're Elijah, some say this and that." And modern Christianity kind of glosses that over, like they're not touching on the fact that they're really asking people, who is he? Is he the reincarnation of one of these old prophets? And but that gets glossed over, and nobody really focuses much on it. So there's still kernels of truth in there. But it was a great show, and even though, again, I'm not a Christian, it really hit me in a lot of ways and brought back some spirituality and spiritual feelings that I feel I've been missing for a long time. It rekindled something in me watching this show. Now, does that mean I'm going to go to church? No. You couldn't drag me back kicking and screaming. I'd be too bored to death, because I have my own opinions. I have different opinions. Now, again, that's not saying to any of you who are Christian that I'm putting down your faith and beliefs, because I'm absolutely not. You can do what you need to do. Follow whatever path you need to follow in order to live your life and have the most spiritual life that you can, whatever's meant for you. Each one of us is an individual. We're meant to follow different paths. So you can follow Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, whatever. I tend to lean a little bit more towards the nature, Aboriginal style of spirituality, because I feel it's more closer to where we really should have come from, where we came from, where we really should be before organized religion came in with all their dogma and rules and sin and hell, and you need to do what we tell you to or you're going to hell, which, there is no hell. We're living it right now, if you ask me. It's what you make of it. There are tales of people who have had near-death experiences, and a majority of people who have had NDEs report very positive ones. People who go through and they meet loved ones who've passed on. They meet angels or guides. People meet Jesus. And every once in a while, someone will have a very negative experience where they feel like they go to hell. And do I feel that they've gone to a real hell? Not necessarily, for the same reason that I don't quite believe that they're going and meeting Jesus per se. Because I think that when we cross over, we take a lot of our own biases and beliefs with us for the first layer. As we cross over, we're still who we are from this lifetime before we come into our entire being, and then all the memories come flooding back, and we realize that the lifetime we've just led is one small part of the totality of who we are, all the other different lifetimes and experiences, not only in the physical earth plane, but on many other different levels and planes. So again, it's whatever path you need to follow, and don't let anybody tell you any different. Don't let anybody try to scare you into following a certain path. I mean, I have to admit, I was bitter for many years after when I was growing up in the church. I was very religious and tried to follow the doctrines of Christianity, and tried not to, think outside the box. And my mind just wasn't working that way. And it wasn't until I started hitting my late teens, early 20s, I realized, you know what? I have to just admit to myself, I don't believe in this. Not the way it's been taught to me. And there were too many inconsistencies that I saw within the Bible. The Bible, I do not believe, is the absolute word of God. It's the words of man, taken from oral tradition and then written and rewritten and rewritten and reprocessed until you have the Bible today. And you can go out and buy several Bibles right now and compare the passages next to each other, and each translation has slightly different meanings to them. So you can use it as a guide. You can go, you read, and you hold on to, like anything in life, you can read and take into you what makes sense to you. And if something doesn't serve you, disregard it and move on with your life. No, you're not going to go to hell. You're not going to get punished for it. The God of the Old Testament, I firmly believe, is not the God of the New Testament. I think that was much more of a spiritual. Those writings were more spiritual, at least the ones based on Jesus. Now, the later writings in the New Testament, I take issue with some of them, especially those of Paul, because he was a Roman who he kind of came in and took over leading the religion and put in all of his own dogma, telling women to be silent in church and coming up with a lot of the rules and dogma that Jesus never said a word about any of this stuff. And people look at those letters and they treat them as quote unquote gospel when Jesus never said those things. Now, we have to also take into account, great possibility, a lot of what supposedly Jesus said he never said, or it was taken out of context. I refer to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library that were discovered in the 50s and 70s in the Sinai region, the old manuscripts that were hidden from the Romans, that there were manuscripts in there like the Gospel of Thomas, which is nothing. It's not a narrative. It's just a complete history or a listing of different things that Jesus said. And some of them we're very familiar with that are in the canonical Bibles, and some things that are wildly different. And some things you kind of wrap your head around a bit, because it goes against what we've been taught in Christianity. So I'm very interested in all of that, all of biblical history. I don't know why I'm drawn to the region. I'm drawn to the Middle East and going back to the biblical days, but also, everything from, in Egypt as well. And that whole area, from Egypt all the way up through Israel and the Sinai up into what's now modern day Iraq, but that whole area, and into Turkey as well. That whole area calls to me in a lot of ways, and I'm always fascinated whenever they have new discoveries of ancient sites that are discovered. There was one point they thought they found the tomb of Jesus, and they made a big deal about it and did a special on it. Yet at the same time, you have to understand that what we think of Jesus, with what we call him in the English, Jesus in Spanish, but the actual Hebrew word name for him was Yeshua. Yeshua was his real name. Now, Yeshua is actually an old version of what we consider also to be Joshua. So Jesus was most likely Joshua. And it was Yeshua ben Yosef. Yosef being Joseph, his father. Maria, or Maria as Mary, is what we call it. And, the other thing that a lot of people kind of turn a blind eye to is the fact that, especially Catholicism, where they worship the Virgin Mary. But the fact is, okay, let's set the virgin side of it apart. Okay, was Jesus a miraculous birth? Maybe. I think that there might have been some hanky-panky going on there genetically, if, as some people, researchers have suggested, that Jesus might have been a hybrid, might have been artificially inseminated Mary, to produce a person who's had incredible psychic abilities, was able to perform these so-called miracles that really aren't miracles. They're the manipulation of matter and energy, and is something that we as human beings all used to be able to do hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago. But it's been beaten out of us. We've been deprogrammed, we've devolved, and we're no longer able to do these things. But there are people out there who are psychic in the world, who can tap into these energies, who can heal by laying hands. We still have the abilities in us, but especially in Western society, we have it totally brainwashed out of us from childhood onward. And these gifts are not fostered. And even people who have them strongly, I know several people who are very, very sensitive to psychic energies, to spiritual energies, and can do things, and they're afraid to do anything with it. They just want to live a normal life, and they push it aside. Other people who go around claiming they have these abilities really don't, because they're trying to make money off of it. Not saying that about every psychic. I've met a few psychics out there that are actually really good. But I've also met UFO abductees, contactees, who've had experiences and then afterwards not only became psychic, but could also do healing, laying of hands, and healing people. Now, also remember in the Bible that Jesus taught his disciples how to do all these things. And then he sent them out into the land, into different directions. And they went around performing these miracles. They were healing the sick. They were preaching. They did miracles. And it wasn't just Jesus alone. He taught other people how to do them. And does that mean that these disciples were only able to do it because of Jesus's power? No, it's the power within them. It's the power within all of us. And I feel that that's what the real Jesus was really sent here to do, is sent here to teach us, to help us connect to that part of ourselves that we've forgotten, to become more on a spiritual level. And that is something that we really struggle with, especially nowadays. I see what's going on in the world with, our modern technology is making us take more steps backwards than ever. With cell phones and television and the internet and all the different manipulation that's going on out there, and people being told what to do here, what to do that, taking control of people's lives. Our government's getting way out of control and not leaving people to make their own darn decisions about their lives. And everything is becoming about control, which is exactly what the organized religion is. People who think the Pope is infallible, well, popes have started wars. Popes have done lots of bad things. You never hear about the female Pope, Pope Joan, who passed herself off as a man and was Pope for a while until they realized, she got caught and realized that she was a woman. And that caused quite a scandal. There is just so much that is within us that we are capable of. And if we can connect with that spirituality that's within us, we can do some amazing things. And a lot of what we need to reconnect with is our own compassion. And we need to stop judgment. I mean, there's a lot of things that Jesus supposedly said that really resonate still today, and teaching us. He came to teach us how to live with one another, how to live a spiritual life, not worshiping material things. He said things like, it's harder for a rich man. What was it? Oh, now I'm going to screw this up. It's harder for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, people think, well, so if the rich people, they're not going to get to go to heaven. That's not exactly what that means. It's people who are so focused on a material lifestyle that they've ignored the spiritual aspects. They're not going to grow spiritually. They're not going to reach that state of completion as fast as maybe someone who is way lower down the economic chain. The poor people who have their faith and hang on to spirituality, they are going to get closer to God quicker than people who worship mammon, as it was called, or material things. A rich man came to Jesus once and asked him, how he can come to get in the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus said, well, get rid of your worldly possessions and come follow me. And the man left because he was really rich and he didn't want to give up his worldly possessions. Now, does that mean we have to walk out of our homes and throw away, everything that we own and go live on the streets or live a solitary path? That's not what he meant. But it means stop worshiping those material things and start focusing on a spiritual life, turning within, listening to our own inner voices, our higher selves, the better angels of our nature, and living each day from a spiritual angle point of view to do good not only in our own lives but to help others. And that's one of the things I'm most concerned about, and that bothers me the most with what's happening nowadays, is the constant negativity and us versus them mentality that is being instilled in everybody. And I'm talking about from both sides of the aisle. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. One thing we need is compassion. We need to take care of our people. Now, the left claims, with these immigrants coming up from Mexico and Central and South America, we need to have compassion, let them into the country and help them. Okay, fine. Then what about our own homeless? What about our homeless veterans? People here who are struggling already, and we're not lifting a finger to help them. Or one thing I'm looking at now is my day job is I'm a recruiter. And we are in a position right now where if you'll drive around, you'll see help wanted signs everywhere. Every business, especially service-related businesses like restaurants and stores, any place that deals with the public, you're going to see help wanted signs up. They can't fill those positions. Why? Because of COVID, because of all the fear and contradictions that we were given over the last year and a half, and the programs that they put in place to pay people to stay home. State of New York, which I try to hire positions for, I can't get anybody for these positions. These are positions that people would kill to get into normally, but they won't even apply. Why? Because they're getting unemployment and all the way through September, and they would rather stay at home and collect their checks rather than go to work. Servers who work in restaurants, and this is something I've always disagreed with, they pay servers and hostesses, however you want to put it, they pay them crap wages, minimum wages, $3 an hour, because then they get tips. And then they try to live off their tips. Well, first of all, I think tipping is really stupid. And it's inconsistent. And people who work their ass off can get screwed over by people who don't want to tip them. And they work their butt off, get their $3 an hour, and get low tips for the night. Some people make very good tips a night if they give good customer service. I personally feel the European model is different. They look at us Americans like we're nuts when we go over there and tip. It's almost an insult because they get paid. They get paid the right wages for doing the job, which is what we should be doing. There are minimum wage jobs here that are not meant to be a living wage job. And when they keep raising the minimum wage, they think, well, we're helping people to make more money. But those service industries can't support that. And now what are we getting nowadays? Less people helping us in the stores. We have to do our own checkouts. Now, in most stores, they have self-checkouts. You go into a McDonald's and they have a kiosk that you press buttons to order your food so that they don't have to pay somebody to work. There's somebody who doesn't have a job right then and there. Now, working at McDonald's as on a line is not meant to be a full-time job. There are other jobs. It's like something for high school, something while you're in college, something maybe you work part-time and do something else. I'm just going to have to say it. Our economy and the way we do things is so ass backwards. And I don't agree with it. I would not call myself a capitalist by any means. I do have socialist tendencies. I think there's some things that we should be helping each other on more. But at the same time, the socialism that they're trying to promote nowadays isn't truly a socialist society that works, because money and greed and power are all still involved. And trying to do some of this on such a mass scale doesn't work because of the greedy, because of the lazy, because of the type of society and people that we have developed over all of these years. I'll look back at, which I have a high respect for, the Aboriginal peoples, especially the Native Americans and the Indian tribes throughout North America, going all the way down into South America, throughout the whole Americas, even the Australian Aboriginal tribes. And what I respect about them is before the Europeans came over and conquered them, they had very spiritual lives. They had communities where they helped one another. They didn't have money per se. There was a barter system. People did trade. They helped the poor people who were in their community. If somebody didn't have a horse or whatever, they would be given a horse, or they'd be given a lodge, teepee, to keep a roof over their heads. The community would come together to help those people. Let's say there was a family and the husband got killed and there's a wife and children at home. It was considered a great honor for someone to step up and say, I will take care of their needs. And that was looked on with pride. It was something that people, it was a very positive thing and looked on greatly within those communities and the tribes. And it's harder to do that nowadays because these were tiny, small communities, not big cities with millions of people and all the problems that come with it. I'm not a big city fan. I prefer a more rural environment and smaller communities where people actually work together. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you follow, what nationality you are. We are all children of the Creator. We are all human. We are all here as one family, trying to learn from this lifetime and trying to advance ourselves. And that's what, I feel the real Jesus was trying to teach us. There's whole books written about whether or not Jesus was real. Some people say a lot of the Jesus myth was taken from Mithraism and even from some Egyptian theology. And maybe that's true. Maybe the whole virgin birth or even the crucifixion or the resurrection, that's been told in several different religions over time that predated Christianity. So whether that actually happened, I can't say. And so instead of focusing on what may have historically happened, I'll focus on what the message was. What the message was and how to live our lives. And everything that I feel that is in the Bible that has a positive message or a teaching message of trying to get people to stop behaving badly and start behaving in such a way that not only makes them better people but helps them to be better people to others. Treat each other with kindness and respect. Something very much lacking these days. Not hating our neighbors, not hating people who are not like us or don't hold our beliefs, or always drumming on the sins of the past. Well, you know what? The past is the past, and the past happened. I'm a history buff, okay? I know what happened from the time of Columbus all the way up through the forming of the United States and what this country has become. You know what? It was not a pretty picture. It was. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Not only was slavery, which is the big thing that they're really pushing nowadays, but we didn't have just black slavery. We had white slavery, white indentured service. The Irish were enslaved. The Chinese were enslaved, building our railroads and sent into mines. A lot of the immigrants who came over here were taken advantage of. Not to mention the one culture that I feel really needs reparations and needs more attention and more focus on is the Native American population, because they got more screwed in so many different ways, including genocide. Not only the U.S. military coming in and attacking peaceful camps like what happened at Sand Creek in Colorado. They wiped out 200 people. The Battle of Wounded Knee, 200 people were murdered in the snow just because they were ghost dancing, because they were led to believe if they did this dance that it would bring back their old ways and their old life, which was a threat to the government. We've done some pretty terrible things, our government. I don't trust our government as far as I can throw it. Now, do I love this country? Absolutely, I love this country. I love the land. I love the people. We do have a form of government that, if it is handled correctly, could be fantastic, could really work. The Founding Fathers, the way that they put together the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, was there flaws? Absolutely. Slavery was still a part of it. We should have gotten rid of slavery immediately. We focused too much, especially in the latter half after the Civil War with the Industrial Revolution, and then we became such an insanely capitalistic society that money and greed and power ruled the day, and it stunted our growth as a society, as a race of people, because everything is now everyone's worshiping the almighty dollar and who has the power, who's in charge. I'll go back to the things that Jesus said, about not worshiping the physical things or the money, and concentrating more on your soul and your spirit and developing yourself. There are people in the world right now who live under repressive regimes, and I'm afraid that if the U.S. doesn't get their shit together here real quick, we're gonna be one of those regimes. But you know what? When it comes down to it, in some ways it doesn't matter, because you still live your life spiritually. You still try to be a positive influence on others. If we raise our consciousness, raise our humanity, and we can actually affect change in the world. I know Whitley Strieber has done a lot of research into this, where they've actually conducted experiments, getting hundreds, if not thousands, of people at a time to do meditation and focus on a certain outcome for something, and it seems to work. It's this mass consciousness that we are all interconnected in one way or another, and I think we can affect change. As long as we start looking at the positive side of life, if we start rejecting those things that are not helping us to evolve, fear being one of them. Fear is, as Frank Herbert and Dune said, fear is the mind killer. And we need to get away from it and get in touch more with our spiritual selves. Now, kind of getting back to the show The Chosen, again, I just want to reiterate the fact that that show, even though I'm not a Christian and I have a couple of small quibbles with it, I still very highly recommend, just because of how it will make you feel. It's so well acted and so well written, and the actors are great, and how they're presented as real human beings, especially Jesus. Jesus in this is again, he's humorous. He's got a sense of humor. He's passionate, but there are times also where he's still suffers a little bit of doubt. There are times when he's praying, when you could tell he's not quite sure about some things, where he's working, he's dripping in sweat, he has troubled look on his face, and yet his passion comes in to play whenever he's actually interacting with people and starting to talk to them and bring about his message. It's really infectious. It's very infectious. And even some of the Roman characters in this are very cool to watch. Some of them who come into doubt. There's even character Nicodemus. He's played by, I forget his name, this character actor. He's been in a lot of movies, like the original Stargate movie and the Mummy movies and whatnot. And he plays a high priest, part of the Sanhedrin, Nicodemus, who questions his own faith, and he starts hearing about Jesus, and he goes and sees some of the miracles, and he has long conversation with Jesus, who tries to convince him to follow him. And when it came down to it in the end, he couldn't do it, and because he couldn't leave it due to pressures of his wife and his long standing tradition, and his position, things that were expected of him, he couldn't give all that up. But the last scene of him was crying hysterically because he wasn't brave enough to take those steps to follow Jesus. Now I'm curious to see what they do with the character in the upcoming seasons. I mean, he was never a disciple of Jesus directly, but I'd like to think that maybe he comes around, because he's almost there. Even Jesus in the show says, he almost had it. I thought we had him. And but people have free will. We all have free will. We all make our own choices, and we have to follow our own paths, and sometimes we take the long way around. I can't tell you I started really walking a spiritual path in my early 20s. And there have been times in my life where I've gone the opposite way into the material world for years. I'll admit that the last 4 or 5 years I've been kind of in that. I used to be very involved with my paranormal research and being more involved in more spiritual stuff. I was studying some shamanic practices, and then I got out of it. I started letting the real world kind of take over. I got very focused on my job and my life and my wife and I and what we would be doing and planning, and I stopped focusing on the spiritual side of things. I even stopped focusing on the paranormal side of things. I gave a lot of it up. Some of it had to do with depression, because I've suffered from clinical depression all my life, and when I was not on the right medication to help me out, I went into some really bad areas and times, and where I would kind of purge myself of all of those things and not follow it. But these days I've come back to it, and it's really calling to me, which is, again, one of the reasons why I'm talking to you and I'm sharing this with you on this program, and to help spark some thought and debate. I want people to think for themselves. I'm not asking anybody to believe or accept anything I'm saying. It's up to you. You figure out what works for you. You figure out what is in your best interests. But you need to ask yourself at that time, when you're doing something, when you're doing an action, or you got to make a decision, is it a decision that is going to hurt anybody else? Is it a decision that is going to take you away from a more spiritual point of view or point in your life? We're forced in this society to be very money-based. We have no choice. Those of us who grew up here, it's all around us, and we're inundated with the propaganda from the media and companies, big corporations who run the country right now. Our politicians they're not our leaders. They're never supposed to be our leaders. They're supposed to do what we need them to do to make the country better. And you know what? I'll say it right now. For the most part, there is one exception, but I'm not going to mention who, because it drives people crazy. But for the most part, in my lifetime, there has not been a single president or Congress that has really done the right thing for all the people. Some were better than others. Some are flat out horrible. And some are being used as pawns for other controlling interests. Both foreign nationals who don't have our best interests at heart and have gotten themselves too wedged into our infrastructure. And we're not making decisions. We're not spending our money that we're printing like crazy, and we're not balancing our budgets and being responsible, and we're not spending it here on Americans. Again, this isn't a Republican point of view. This is like the current administration. First thing they do is they cancel this pipeline, cut 70,000 oil workers out of a job, and yet they go over and agree to build a pipeline with Russia. How does that help us? How does that make any sense? Now, granted, I'm against fossil fuels to begin with, because we should have gotten off of oil, 100 years ago. The electric cars that we have now are a joke, because the lithium batteries are so toxic. First of all, what they do to strip mine to get these batteries for these cars destroys the environment. Then when the car dies, you got to dispose the batteries. They're almost as toxic as nuclear waste. You can't just throw them away, and they're harmful to the environment. Now, I had heard for years of different technology, even going back to Nikola Tesla, and some of his inventions, where he was coming up with ideas to provide free energy where we wouldn't have to pay from it. We would pull electricity out of the air. Or people who developed, let's say, car engines that worked off of the Earth's natural magnetic field. You'd never have to fill up with gas. You wouldn't have to, build these really toxic batteries that needed to be charged. And when people plug in their cars, charging and thinking, I'm driving an electric car, I'm saving the planet. And yet that electricity is coming from coal plants, gas plants, non-clean energy, which is creating the electricity for these cars. It's a joke. It's a joke. But anyway, I digress. So I'm going to wrap this up tonight and just ask people, if you get a chance to see the show The Chosen, whether you're a Christian or not, give it a chance. Again, you're going to be amazed at how it presents the life of people back then, the characters, which are all intriguing, even especially Jesus, but even the other secondary characters. And it really touches on spirituality in a way that no other religious program that I've ever seen has done. And it really called to me, even though, I am not a Christian. I don't make any bones about it. So give it a chance, watch it, and if you ever get a chance, let me know what you think. And as I always ask people, please let me know your thoughts on the show. If you have any suggestions or feedback, I appreciate feedback. You can write me at Mark, M-A-R-K, at paukradio.com. You can also reach us on our Facebook pages for Paranormal UK Radio Network on Facebook, and or you can PM me on Facebook, send me a friend request, and if anybody ever has any questions or anything, feel free to contact me. Like I said, even if you want to tell me I suck or you don't agree with me, fine with me. I like the one-on-one interaction with people. One of these days, if I get enough people tuning in at a time, if I could ever do this as a live call-in program and talk to people, I would love to do that, because I love talking to people. I love, not debating, but sharing of ideas and learning, because I've been learning so much from people doing these radio shows these last 10 years that I've been doing them. So until next time, I'll try to do these shows a little bit more often, although in the next couple of weeks I'm going to be doing some traveling, so I'm not sure when I'll get out the next show, hopefully soon. In the meantime, everyone, you have a great week, and I will be back with a new edition soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.